Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to be walking you through how to make your own homemade elderberry syrup. So elderberry syrup is great to use as a condiment, just like you would any type of fruit syrup on pancakes, in yogurt, in tea. But the really amazing thing about elderberry syrup, beyond its culinary aspects, is elderberry syrup is one of the best homemade natural remedies that you can have on hand to use during the cold and flu season. So elderberry syrup, we have documentation, and the source that I'm using for this, where they actually did studies on it, is through the U.S. National Library of Medicine National Institute of Health. And their studies showed that elderberries help boost the immune system, and specifically against influenza viruses. It's also very high in vitamin C, which we know is great as boosting our health as well. And it has anti-inflammatory properties. So it's, like I said, it's one of the best things to have on hand during cold and flu season. And the great thing about elderberry syrup, because it is a fruit, is it's one that we can use with our kids. There's some of your different, when you get into your herbs and the immune boosting and different things like that, if you have certain medical conditions and or age, you don't want to be using it, and you can't use a lot of them, or you shouldn't for prolonged periods of time. They can be used acutely, but elderberry syrup is one that you can use daily, and then when you're starting to exhibit signs of things coming on, then you can increase and use it more often to really give your system that aided boost that it needs to fight things off. So elderberry syrup is very simple to make. What we have here are dried elderberries, and I have elderberry plants, which I have a link to growing elderberry plants if you want to catch that video. But mine are too immature. They will begin to flower and produce fruit this year, but they're only 2 years old. And so usually between 2 and 3 years is the plant needs to be that old before you can get fruit. So last year, there was actually an elderberry shortage, because the good news is so many people are beginning to learn about and know, and word's getting out about how great elderberry is as a natural in your natural medicine cabinet, but there was a national shortage. So definitely getting those plants and growing your own is best. But if you can't do that, or yours aren't producing yet, or you don't have enough, Farmhouse Teas, which is a friend of mine and an affiliate, they have organic dried elderberries for a great price. And I talked to Cian, it's a small family farm and owner, and she promised me that they had plenty in stock, because I told her I was going to be doing this video and sharing this recipe with you guys. So if you need to get organic elderberries, you can go to melissaknorris.com/elderberry, and I will have the link below the video as well. And you can get, they have an elderberry syrup kit, as well as just dried organic elderberries. So we'll talk more about that, but you can get them there. And thank you so much if you do. I get a small commission back, so thank you. I really appreciate that, but it obviously doesn't cost you any more. And it's a great family farm. They have some other great things you're going to want to check out too. So the ratio, whenever you're making your syrup, and it's going to depend on the size of your family and how much you're going to be going through, but you're going to do 1 part dried elderberry to 2 parts water. So for example, today I'm going to be doing a ½ cup of my dried elderberries here to 1 cup water. So we're just going to go ahead and put these in the saucepan. And then we're going to put this on the stove and bring it up to a boil and let this simmer for about 20 minutes. Now, for your elderberry syrup, you can absolutely make it with just elderberries, which is what we're doing here. But there's also a lot of great other herbs that you can add in there, both for flavor and as well as for medicinal properties that you might want to be adding to there. So a fun one for flavor, as well as increasing vitamin C, is going to be orange peel. So I've got dried orange peel here. You could put that in. Another great one a lot of people like to do is to put in some cinnamon. So you can simmer some whole cinnamon sticks in there as well. That's going to give it great flavor. And cinnamon is a very warming herb, which can be great when you are experiencing the chills and you have colds, and it's got some other great properties to it as well. You'll see a lot of people like to add ginger, so you can do fresh ginger root and simmer it at the same time, or you can add dried in if you don't have any fresh. Now, there's one thing that you should know though about, especially when you are using things like ginger, if you are on blood thinners or somebody has a blood clotting disorder, you don't want to be using those, especially when you are not feeling well and are going to be taking this multiple times per day. So my daughter actually has a blood clotting disorder, so I'm making this syrup for our whole family to use, so I'm not putting in any addition of ginger in that today. A lot of times people will like to add in, there's lots of different herbs, rosemary, thyme that they'll want to put in, depending on the different properties they're looking for in it. But if you're looking to use it for more culinary or as like a sweet berry syrup, then most of the time ginger and cinnamon are the ones that people really like to add in there. Of course, there's also, a lot of people will like to add in, this is the elderberry syrup mix that's from Farmhouse Teas, and they have in there rose hips are another great thing to add in. Those are also very high in vitamin C. There's echinacea, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and also astragalus, so there's some different herbs in there. And so you can do lots of different combinations. This one is formulated with Cian's favorite in there. So there's lots of options, which is one of the great things about making your own medicine, depending upon what you're looking for, that you can put in there. But just the base of the elderberries themselves is still a very powerful powerhouse. We'll get a double punch of power in there to use. So we're gonna let those come to a simmer and go for 20 minutes. And then I'll meet you back here and we'll strain those out and walk through the rest of the things you can add into your syrup, as well as shelf life. We do need to talk about safety when using elderberries. So it's very important that you only use the purple or the really dark blue, fully ripe elderberries. And Sambucus nigra is one of the ones that is used most traditionally and medicinally. So there are different types of elderberries. And so the elderberries that are bright red, that don't ripen to a purple or almost blue color, those ones are toxic and you should not be using them. So you do need to make sure it is a purple elderberry that you're using. And you never want to have any of the twigs or the leaves in there when you are using the berries to make your syrup or anything out of them, because the leaves and the bark and the actual branches, the twig part, those contain components in there that are toxic. So we want to make sure that we're only using the berries. And then the reason that we are cooking this syrup is, one, that we can get the juices and we can reconstitute these dried berries. But even if you have fresh ones, is elderberries contain some compounds. So it's an alkaloid that they have in there, as well as hydrocyanic acid. And if you consume those, especially in large amounts, it can cause a lot of stomach distress and it can make you feel really sick. So when you are cooking them like this, it helps to break them down so that then you don't have to worry about those components being in there and being nauseous. So that's one of the reasons that it's great to cook down and make a syrup. Now, depending on the temperature that the berries were dehydrated at, which unless you're dehydrating them yourself, it's kind of hard to know that, that can also, with the dehydration of them, can help lessen those as well. But no need to worry about that here, because we are doing it in a cooked syrup where it's going to be simmering for about 20 minutes. But it is important to know that you're using the right kind of berries and that you don't have any of the twigs or the leaves in there when you are making your syrup and consuming them. So when you are using elderberries medicinally, you actually have 3 options that most people will use, and one of them is to make the syrup, exactly like we're doing today. Another option is to make an elderberry tincture, which is what I've got here. I just got a little bit left from last year, so I'm replenishing my stock. And then the other option is to actually just make an elderberry tea, just like you would brew any type of fruit or herbal tea, and you would just consume that. The beauty of having the tinctures done up, which I have a full natural medicine series within the Pioneering Today Academy where we walk through stocking your medicine cabinet with lots of different things. Elderberries is just one small portion of that, and I have the tincture making video in there. So if you want to learn more about becoming an Academy member and going through very much in depth in that whole series with us, I will have the link below this video, and you can also go to melissaknorris.com/PTA and get more information about the Academy. If it's not open, there's a wait list, so you can just put your email in there in your name, and as soon as we're open, I'll shoot you an email and you can get more information about it that way. But we've got that full series in there, including the elderberry tincture. So tinctures are great because they have a longer shelf life. A tincture will be good depending on if you're going to be using alcohol or vinegar or a vegetable glycerin as the base. And there's different reasons for why you would want to use different ones. If you've got alcohol allergies or giving it to young kids, then a lot of people like to use the vegetable glycerin base, which is what this one is. And the vegetable glycerin base is good in the fridge for about a year. Alcohol is much longer. Those will last almost indefinitely. But the great thing about having a tincture is it's very concentrated, and so you only have to take a small amount and you can make them up, and they're very shelf stable for many, many months. And so you've just got them there because a lot of times when we start to get sick, you really don't feel like having to make all of this. You just kind of want to have it on hand so that you can begin taking it without, where you can just be resting and not making them. So tinctures are great to have on hand, and they don't, all the alcohol ones and vinegar don't have to be in the refrigerator. I do recommend that the vegetable glycerin based ones are stored in the fridge. And then of course you can make the teas, but when you're making the teas, then you're going to be brewing that each and every time. So it just kind of depends on what you want to have on hand and availability. I like to have some of the syrup on hand as well as the tincture. And of course, if I just want to brew up a cup of tea, then I can absolutely do that as well. But those are some of the options and the way that most people will prepare and use elderberry medicinally in their homes. So after this has been simmering for about 6 minutes or so, it doesn't really matter, but you want to come in and you want to kind of mash the berries up to help them release the juices. I actually can't find my potato masher, so anything's going to work. We're just going to use a metal ladle here, and you're just going to want to push down on those, and that just kind of helps get all the juices released from those berries. And then we'll just continue to let that simmer. And if too much begins to evaporate off of the water, then you can go ahead and add another quarter or half a cup of water. Just kind of keep an eye on it. Obviously, we want to have lots of syrup that we can strain out and use. So I think I'm going to go ahead and add in about another half a cup of water to this. Okay guys, so this just got done simmering for 20 minutes. It's still pretty hot, so I'm gonna make sure I put this here on my folded towel. Now, if you have a wire mesh strainer, go ahead and use that. Mine actually is outside. I didn't get it washed in time. The kids were using it for something. So I happen to have a fairly large tea strainer here, and we're just going to go ahead and use that because I didn't have a ton of berries. I was making a smaller batch of this. So definitely we're going to be straining out these berries, and of course, if you had any of those other spices in there, you would be straining them out as well. Okay, and so then you definitely want to get all of the juice out of these berries that we can. So once they are in your tea strainer or your wire mesh, or you can even use, if you've got cheesecloth, that type of thing, anything that you would normally use to strain berries out to get the syrup. So I'm just going to be pressing down on these to get every last bit of the syrup out of them. So now you've got your elderberry syrup that has all been strained out, and from that we ended up adding in 1.5 cups of water to a half a cup of dried elderberries. And I ended up with, after it was simmering, which you do want it obviously to simmer to cook, but then some of that water we do want to evaporate so that we have a very strong concentrate of the syrup of the elderberry. And I'm right at a half a cup of finished elderberry syrup. So in order to, one, it's going to help prolong the shelf life. We do need to store this in the fridge, but also when you're using raw honey has a lot of great health benefits. It also is going to be very palatable. So especially if you're giving this to young kids or people with picky flavors. But the raw honey also has antimicrobial, antibacterial type properties, and along with other great things to really help aid our bodies when we're not feeling well and help us to be operating. So If you want this to be shelf stable in the fridge, I should say, to be able to prolong the life in the fridge and have this be good for up to about 12 weeks, then you do equal amounts of honey to equal amounts of finished syrup. Now, if you don't want yours to be that sweet, one of the things that Cian likes to do, which I love from our farmhouse teas, is she adds in some apple cider vinegar. So raw apple cider vinegar, this happens to be homemade apple cider vinegar. As long as it's raw, it has the mother in there, and is preferably made from organic apples. Then that also has some great health properties, and it's going to help help keep any bacteria from growing in this when it's sitting even in the fridge. So her recommendations are to do just a small amount, about for this amount, we're just going to be doing about a tablespoon of the apple cider vinegar to this. And then we're going to be adding in, I've got a half a cup here, so I think I'm going to do about a quarter cup of the honey. So we're going to go ahead and get that measured in. And if you want to learn how to make your own homemade raw apple cider vinegar, I've got another video on that as well. So I'll make sure and link to that for you below this video, so you can have that homemade and ready to go and use too. So we do not have bees, so I have got some organic honey here that I'm going to be using in this. And a quarter cup is 4 tablespoons, so I'm just going to quickly just measure it out this way rather than get my entire other measuring cup all sticky here, which I think is going to be about the contents of this whole bottle. Almost, not quite. Have a little bit left in there. Okay, then we're just going to get that stirred up. And the reason that we add the honey in later as well as the apple cider vinegar is because I am using raw in both of these, and the heat when it's boiling and simmering there would destroy a lot of the great properties that we have when we're using it raw. And I want to make sure that all of those are retained. So we add it in after it's had a chance to cool down, but it's still warm enough to get everything dissolved, especially if your honey started to crystallize just a little bit. So we've got that all mixed in. And I didn't do quite equal parts of honey with this one. I did a quarter cup to the half a cup of syrup, but I did add in some of that apple cider vinegar. So in the shelf, we're going to get this in a bottle and pop this in the fridge. And so in the fridge, this is going to be good for probably about up to 6 weeks. And that's why I usually make these smaller amounts rather than a huge large batch. And then I only have to do it about every 1.5 to 2 months of the syrup. But just in case we're not going through it that fast, I don't want any of it to go bad. So a jelly jar works great for this. We're just going to pour that in there. And you can use a canning lid if you want. I actually love the Tatler reusable canning lids, and they work really great for these type of projects. So just want to make sure that you have got the little rubber seal on there. Just helps keep any extra air out in the fridge. And then tighten that down. And there you have it. Here is our homemade elderberry syrup. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you hit subscribe and the little bell so that you get notified every time we have a new video. And if you are interested in more natural homemade remedies and making them yourself, please do let me know below in the comments. And if you make elderberry syrup and have any different things that you like to add in or use it on, please do let us know. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.